The air hung heavy with despair. It was as if the very walls of the room absorbed the sorrow, reflecting it back tenfold. The atmosphere was thick, almost suffocating, with a palpable sense of hopelessness that seemed to cling to every surface. The silence was broken only by the drip of a leaky faucet. Each drop echoed through the room, a constant reminder of the passage of time, of moments slipping away irretrievable. It was a sound that had become a cruel metronome to Steve's thoughts, each drip a punctuation to his regrets. Steve sat in the near darkness. His silhouette was barely discernible against the dim light that filtered through the grimy windows. He was hunched over, his shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his failures had physically bowed him. His apartment was almost empty. The once vibrant space, filled with laughter and life, was now a hollow shell. The walls, stripped of their decorations, seemed to close in on him, a stark reminder of everything he had lost. He had sold almost everything. Shame washed over him. Each item he parted with was a piece of his past, a fragment of his identity. The shame was not just in the selling, but in the realization that he had nothing left to give, nothing left to hold on to. He was a shadow of the man he once was. The mirror reflected a stranger, a man whose eyes were hollow, whose face was etched with lines of worry and regret. He barely recognized himself. The confident, successful man he once was seemed like a distant memory, a man who had it all. Now he was lost. The dreams he once chased, the goals he once set, all seemed meaningless now. He was adrift in a sea of uncertainty, with no clear direction, no purpose. Steve's fall from grace had been swift and brutal. It was not a gradual decline, but a sudden, jarring descent. One moment he was on top of the world, and the next he was at the bottom, with nothing to show for his efforts. A series of bad decisions had cost him everything. Each choice, each misstep had led him further down the path of ruin. He could trace his downfall through a series of poor judgments, each one a nail in the coffin of his former life, his job, his family, his dignity. They were all gone. The job that once defined him, the family that once supported him, the dignity that once upheld him, all stripped away by his own actions. He was drowning in regret. It was a suffocating feeling, a weight that pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe, hard to think. The regret was a constant companion, a reminder of what he had lost and what he could never regain. He had hit rock bottom. There was no lower he could go. The realization was both terrifying and oddly liberating. He had nothing left to lose, and in that there was a strange sense of freedom. The weight of his mistakes pressed down on him. He felt hopeless. Each mistake was a burden, a heavy load that he carried with him. The hopelessness was a dark cloud that hung over him, obscuring any glimmer of light.
I can't live like this anymore. The words were a whisper, barely audible, but they carried the weight of his despair. It was a cry for help, a plea for something, anything, to change.
The only light came from a flickering street lamp outside. It cast a weak, intermittent glow that barely penetrated the darkness of the room. The flickering light was a metaphor for his life, once bright and steady, now dim and uncertain. It cast long, eerie shadows across the room. The shadows danced on the walls, creating a nightmarish landscape that seemed to mock his despair. They were a constant reminder of the darkness that had taken over his life. He was trapped in this nightmare. The room, the shadows, the flickering light, all conspired to create a prison from which there seemed to be no escape. It was a living nightmare, one from which he could not wake. He saw no way out. Desperation gnawed at him. It was a relentless, insidious feeling that ate away at his resolve, leaving him feeling hollow and defeated. The desperation was a constant, a reminder of his helplessness. He had to do something, anything. The realization was a spark in the darkness, a glimmer of hope in the sea of despair. He didn't know what he would do, but he knew he couldn't stay in this place, in this state, any longer. It was time to act, to take control, to find a way out of the darkness. Hunger gnawed at Steve's stomach. It was a relentless, twisting pain that seemed to consume his every thought. The emptiness inside him was more than just physical. It was a void that echoed with the memories of better days. Days when he didn't have to worry about where his next meal would come from. He hadn't eaten in 2 days. The last morsel he had was a stale piece of bread he found discarded in an alley. His body was weak, his mind foggy. Every passing minute felt like an eternity. And the gnawing hunger was a constant reminder of his dire situation. He had pawned everything of value. His pockets were empty. The few coins he managed to scrape together were long gone, spent on the barest of necessities. He had nothing left to sell, nothing left to trade. The world seemed to close in on him, a suffocating blanket of despair. He walked aimlessly through the city streets. The neon lights of the shops and restaurants mocked him, their bright colors a stark contrast to the darkness that enveloped his soul. He passed by people who were oblivious to his plight, their laughter and chatter a painful reminder of the life he once had, each step heavier than the last. His legs felt like lead, his feet dragging along the pavement. The weight of his situation bore down on him, a crushing force that threatened to break him with every step he took. He was a ghost haunting his own life. The man he used to be was gone, replaced by this hollow shell. He wandered through the city like a spectre, unseen and unnoticed by those around him. The world moved on, indifferent to his suffering. He passed a big box store, its windows brightly lit. The sight of the well-stocked shelves inside was a cruel reminder of what he lacked. The abundance of food and goods was tantalizingly close, yet so far out of reach. A wave of despair washed over him. The realization that he had no other options left was like a punch to the gut. He had tried everything, exhausted every avenue. There was nothing left but this one desperate act. He knew what he had to do. The decision was made in a heartbeat, a moment of clarity amidst the chaos. He couldn't let himself starve. He couldn't let this be the end. He had to survive, no matter the cost. He couldn't let himself starve. The thought of another night with an empty stomach was unbearable. He had to act, and he had to act now. There was no time for hesitation, no room for doubt. He slipped through the automatic doors. The cool air inside the store was a stark contrast to the oppressive heat outside. He moved quickly, trying to blend in, to become just another face in the crowd. His heart pounded in his chest. The adrenaline coursed through his veins, a mix of fear and determination. Every beat was a reminder of what was at stake, of the risk he was taking. He felt like he was being watched. Every glance, every movement seemed suspicious. He couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on him, that someone would call him out, stop him before he could act.
Just grab it and go. The words echoed in his mind, a mantra of desperation. He had to be quick, had to be decisive. There was no room for error.
He grabbed a loaf of bread and some peanut butter. The items felt heavy in his hands, a lifeline in the midst of his despair. He could almost taste the food, feel the relief it would bring. He shoved them into his coat pocket. His hands trembled. The fear of getting caught was overwhelming, but the need to eat was stronger. He had to keep moving, had to get out before anyone noticed. He felt a surge of adrenaline. It was a rush, a mix of fear and exhilaration. He was doing something he never thought he would, something that went against everything he believed in, but survival was a powerful motivator. He made his way to the front of the store. Each step was calculated, each movement deliberate. He had to appear calm, had to blend in. The exit was in sight, just a few more steps. He kept his head down. Avoiding eye contact, he moved through the aisles. The weight of the stolen items in his pocket was a constant reminder of the risk he was taking. He walked out, his heart racing. He was a criminal. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He had crossed a line, done something he never thought he would. But in that moment, all that mattered was survival. Steve knew he couldn't keep stealing. He needed a job, any job. He saw a help wanted sign at the same store he had stolen from. Guilt gnawed at him, but desperation outweighed his conscience. He walked in, his stomach churning. He lied about his past. He created a false identity. He was a master of deception. He charmed his way through the interview.
You seem like a good fit. When can you start?
He was offered the job on the spot. Relief washed over him. He had a chance to start over. But the lie he had told ate at him. He started working the next day. He was a model employee. He was friendly and helpful. He worked hard and never complained. He was praised by his managers. But behind his smile, he hid a dark secret. he was living a lie. Months turned into years. Time seemed to fly by as Steve dedicated himself to his work. Each day was a new challenge, a new opportunity to prove himself. He poured his heart and soul into his job, often working late into the night, driven by an unspoken need to succeed. Steve excelled at his job. His dedication and hard work did not go unnoticed. He received numerous accolades and awards, each one a testament to his commitment and skill. His colleagues admired him, and his superiors saw great potential in him. He was promoted several times. With each promotion, he climbed higher up the corporate ladder, gaining more responsibility and respect. His new roles came with new challenges, but Steve faced them head-on, determined to prove his worth. He was now in a management position. Leading a team was a new experience for Steve, but he embraced it with enthusiasm. He enjoyed mentoring his colleagues, sharing his knowledge and experience with them. He took pride in their successes, seeing them as a reflection of his own efforts. He had a good salary. Financial stability was something Steve had always dreamed of, and now it was a reality. He could afford the things he had once only fantasized about. He no longer had to worry about making ends meet. He was able to rent a decent apartment. Moving into his own place was a significant milestone for Steve. It was a symbol of his independence and success. He took great pride in his new home, carefully decorating it to reflect his tastes and personality. He was rebuilding his life. Each small improvement to his apartment, each new piece of furniture, was a step towards creating a life he could be proud of. He was determined to leave his past behind and build a future that was bright and full of promise. But the guilt never left him. Despite his successes, Steve couldn't escape the shadows of his past. The mistakes he had made haunted him, a constant reminder of the person he used to be. He often found himself lost in thought, wondering if he would ever truly be free of his guilt. He oversaw security for the store. It was a role that required vigilance and attention to detail. Steve took his responsibilities seriously, knowing that the safety and security of the store depended on him. He was responsible for catching shoplifters. The irony of his situation was not lost on him. He had once been on the other side, taking what didn't belong to him. Now it was his job to stop others from doing the same. The irony wasn't lost on him. Every time he caught a shoplifter, he saw a reflection of his former self. It was a constant reminder of the person he used to be and the person he was trying to become. He was now the protector of the very things he had stolen. It was a strange twist of fate, but one that Steve accepted. He saw it as a way to atone for his past mistakes, to make amends for the wrongs he had committed. He was haunted by his past. The memories of his past actions were like ghosts, haunting his dreams and his waking moments. He often woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, the weight of his guilt pressing down on him. He saw himself in the eyes of every shoplifter he caught. It was as if he was looking into a mirror, seeing the same desperation and fear that he had once felt. It was a painful reminder of the person he used to be.
I can't keep living like this. The guilt was eating him alive, and he knew he couldn't continue living with the burden of his past. He needed to find a way to move forward, to find peace.
He struggled to reconcile his past with his present. The person he was now was so different from the person he used to be. He had worked hard to change, to become someone he could be proud of. But the past was always there, lurking in the shadows. He was a changed man. He wanted to confess, to come clean, but he was afraid. The fear of losing everything he had worked so hard to build was overwhelming. He didn't know if he could face the consequences of his past actions. He had worked too hard to rebuild his life. Every success, every achievement was a testament to his determination and resilience. He couldn't bear the thought of losing it all. He couldn't risk losing everything again. The fear of losing his job, his home, his newfound stability was too great. He had come too far to let it all slip away. He was trapped in his own personal prison. The guilt and fear were like bars confining him, keeping him from truly moving forward. He longed for freedom, for peace, but he didn't know how to find it.